Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR, a podcast and video series dedicated to helping us overcome the limiting beliefs, self-doubt, and imposter syndrome that so many of us HR professionals face. Here are your hosts with over 45 years experience in HR and certified life coaches, Jen and Katherine.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Thrive and Shine HR, episode number 38. Well, hello, Katherine. How are you doing, and how's your Thursday going?
My Thursday's amazing. My highlight, like what I'm heading into after we record this podcast, I'm going to indulge in some Netflix this evening. I thought I had an exciting night planned. Will you please tell our listeners what you get to do? Will you please tell them what you are doing tonight compared to my Netflix?
Yeah, I'm lucky where I'm at a conference right now in Vegas, and tonight is the last night of the conference. It's been a 3-day conference. So there's a part of me that's exhausted.
Okay.
Is exhausted, but as a final piece of the conference, I get to go see Kelly Clarkson. Very exciting. My husband and I watched the very first season of American Idol many years ago. So being able to now go and see her live, this is my first time seeing her live. So this will be a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Talent.
What's that?
She has a talent. Her vocal range, not that I even really understand what that means. She's just an incredible singer. I'm so excited for you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm here in Vegas. Hopefully the sound and the video and all of that works well. But if I end up having any technical issues, I'm going to apologize in advance to everybody who's listening and watching today. But we are live here on Thursday, and we are talking about victim mentality.
Oh, yes.
So the difference between what distinguishes any of our experiences from being a victim and truly being a victim of our circumstances, or mindsets that many times we end up, creating based on truly seeing ourselves as a victim. So it's going to be a pretty powerful episode. I'm excited about digging in and really getting in there. So you ready to go for it, Katherine?
I'm so ready. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Let's do it. So, okay, question number 1. What is your understanding of the difference between being a victim of a situation and having a victim mentality?
Okay, so I started getting a little bit freaked out about this question today because yesterday I sponsored an employment law seminar. So I'm a SHRM and HRCI recertification coach. Why did I just say that? I'm a recertification provider. I am a coach, but I'm a recertification provider. So HRCI and SHRM trust me enough to say, this woman in HR knows what she's doing after 28 some odd years in HR. She is going to recertify our certified professionals throughout the world. So such an honor. And I went to this employment law seminar. Got to give a shout out to this guy, Michael Santo. He's a lawyer. He's based in Grand Junction, Colorado. He did an 8-hour monologue about the law. And I started sweating yesterday, which I do every single time I go to an employment law concert. Jeez, I'm going to Kelly Clarkson. I'm getting everything confused. So an employment law seminar, because everything changes so much and so rapidly at the federal level, at the state level. And when I started thinking about this recording of this podcast, I led HR Empower Hour on Tuesday on this topic. I gave a great tool for people suffering with victim mentality or dealing with employees suffering with victim mentality, right? Mm-hmm. I go to this seminar yesterday and I'm like, oh my God, I think I have to change my answers. I have to change everything because in Colorado last year in 2023, there was a law that was passed. It's called the Power Act, POWR Act. And it basically says under Title VII, Jen, I know you're going to remember this. Like under Title VII, if you're in a protected class, the words severe and pervasive really defined if you were truly a victim of harassment under Title VII. Those words, severe and pervasive, have just like ruminated in my brain anytime I'm doing an investigation at work, anytime I'm looking into, you'll love this, a hostile work environment. And I say that because Michael Santo, this lawyer, yesterday used the word hostile work environment, which I haven't heard in a decade, right? Everyone talks about a toxic workplace now. And he like brought up hostile work environment. I was like, you're my man. Like, you're as old as I am. I love this. I love that you remember that language. So
yeah,
I bring all of this up by saying the way I think about a victim is somebody who has been violated, who's been harassed, either sexually or unlawfully, under anything under Title VII. And of course, if anyone, trigger warning for sure on this, anyone who's been sexually harassed, who's a victim of domestic violence. Like I have absolutely had calls from women who have said, my partner just was arrested last night. I am bloodied and battered and I can't come into the office and I need help. So that to me is a victim by law, whether it's new state statute in Colorado, whether it's federal law. That to me is a true victim. And then a victim mentality, conversely, is really just a psychological state where somebody feels as though they are being harmed, perhaps over and over and over again, but the court of law wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I know that's kind of a weird way to answer it, but victim mentality is just when somebody perceives themselves to be a victim all the time, even when the circumstances don't warrant it.
Yeah.
And what I find is that victim, being a true victim, and we talked about this in the HR Empower Hour on Tuesday, they're so gut-wrenching. It is so awful. It happens to people in HR. It happens to women in HR as well. But when you look at like the percentage of time you spend in HR on somebody dealing with being a victim, it's pretty small. It's a pretty small percentage. What I found yesterday, HR Empower Hour, did not surprise me. The women were saying they spend about roughly 35% of their time dealing with their own victim mentality, the woe is me, or an employee mentality, just being bombarded in HR with my boss is being mean to me. I'm the only one who picks up the slack. No one's listening to my ideas, those types of things. That is the victim mentality. So HR, it's rough either way. I just talked for a long time and I haven't had caffeine since this morning. So I don't know what is happening. I think I just went to the Kelly Clarkson show. I think that's what's happening. Okay. I applaud all over. What is your working definition of the difference between the two, of victim and victim mentality?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I really appreciated your definitions. I mean, truly, because being able to break down, there's so much, I think, overflow or overlap between one and another really in my mind. And so I'm going to go a little less technical, but yes. I love that that's where you started, was the technical. And I'm going to go more around like every individual who experiences an event that they might perceive as traumatic or impactful in some way that's caused a reaction. It's, I find like in our legal system, one of the things that actually makes me a little crazy sometimes is how the legal system defines things in such a way that it puts people who really have an experience that they truly feel impacted by, that they don't count because they don't fit in this box, or they don't fit in that box.
So interesting. Yeah.
So there's something about that drives me a little nutty, because really it's about like, was that an experience that really kind of knocked you off your sense of self, or, your whatever it might be. And I think for every individual, regardless of what that experience could be, it could be different. And so that to me is a victim, there's victimness to that. Like, was there an event? Did that event have a negative impact that caused somebody to, really feel impacted? And so from that standpoint, then, for me, when I get out of kind of the legal and the technical definitions, the victim mentality is very much what you said. It's when it then ruminates. It's when it then becomes something that is just processing over and over again. And it's not becoming like something that's moving you towards solution. It's not moving you towards, resolution. It becomes resentment. It becomes this pain that just recycles. That's victim mindset. And that's, unfortunate to me, because it's so sad when you see people who truly have been impacted by tremendous adversity. Like, I was so blessed yesterday. I was fourth in line out of like a conference of 4,000 people to see Viola Davis, an actress, yesterday. And I got to sit in the second row. And, what I was like so beyond impressed with in her speech yesterday was like, everybody has faced adversity. Everybody has had something happen in their life that has knocked us on our ass, right?
Amen.
You and I have talked before about, like, we have both had experiences, and the way that I kind of look at it is like a snow globe, right? I have had experiences in my life where the globe got shook to the point where I didn't know which way was north, south, east, west. I had no freaking clue for months and months and months. And that's true. Like, there's true victimness in that. And again, that's where it gets goofy for me in terms of defining how long is someone supposed to be in a state that has shaken them to their core. I don't have the answer to that. But what I can say is, when you get to a point where you're just like, bleh, it just goes over and over and over again, and you're not actually trying to take action to grow from it, to evolve from it, to like move through it and past it. Now you're becoming, now you're taking that into a mindset of victimhood. And so that, anyway, I did a long answer too.
Well, I think because we feel so passionately about this.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's something that really, really impacts our profession. 1,000%. So I think it's really important to talk about.
Yeah. No, yeah. So I think, with this, let's kind of dive into the next question. How does that sound?
I love it. Love it.
So how have you seen the victim mentality show up in the workplace, especially in different HR roles that you've had in the past?
I mean, in every single HR role that I've been in, whether it's when I was 21 years old and was suddenly promoted to director at 21 years old because my boss did not come back from maternity leave, right? So whether I was super young, whether I was taking an organization global, whether I was in the public sector, whether I've been a consultant, which I've only been doing for the last 2 years, it doesn't matter. Victim mentality shows up all the time. And I think the reason I see it so much is because I suffered with victim mentality and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
I am so open about this. I remember very specifically one of my specific experiences. I was early 20s. I had just put the holiday party together. It was off-site. We had rented out this bar/club in the middle of Aspen, Colorado.
Nice.
So awesome. So fun. We were a mid-sized employer, 210 employees. And I was, I couldn't have been driving back on the phone because there were not cell phones back then. I was back at the organization and my boss was like, "Hey, how'd it go? How's it going?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm just not really that happy with the decorations. I just wish I had more time. So-and-so, didn't hold up their end of the bargain in terms of providing that donation for the gift certificate to that restaurant in town. And I just don't know how this is going to turn out." I mean, I'm saying that to my boss. Now, I live in a small community. We're very open and honest. You're just tight with the people you work with. And to this day, I will never forget, because her name was Melissa. I love her. Shout out to Melissa. We are still friends. She's amazing. We both still live in this community. She's incredible. And she was like, "Oh my God, you just have to stop." And I was like, oh, okay. So when I think about, and that was, I mean, this is like 30 years ago. This is a very, very long time ago. So I'm a perfectionist. I want things to be perfect. I have really high standards. I'm a high achiever, obviously. HR director at the age of 21 years old, right? Striver. And I didn't even realize that the thoughts I was choosing were that of being a victim. I was a victim of my circumstances. I was a victim of people not doing what they said they would. I was a victim of my own high standards. And it took me until my mid 40s to actually see that. So it was my own victim mentality, but it was also people coming to my office, right? And the examples that I am hearing now as a consultant, as a recertifications provider, can sound something like this. My boss started the meeting 5 minutes late. And because my partner showed up to dinner 5 minutes late last night, I just need to go home for the day. I need to go home for the day. I'm not well. And Jen, I have to be honest. I am a full-on Gen Xer. Y'all know I'm turning 50 next year. I struggle with this. So when you started by saying it's whatever somebody's experience is, that they're a victim, right? And Colorado law would agree with you. It doesn't have to be severe and pervasive. But if people who are like-minded, this is what Colorado law says. If let's just say single women who are dating, who also experience a partner being late, and then they experience it at work and they consider it little t trauma, doesn't have to be severe and pervasive anymore. Colorado law would say that is a victim in the workplace. And that blows my mind a little bit. So apparently I am going to have different answers than I was going to have. I'm still just reeling. And maybe I'm misinterpreting. I am not a lawyer. Maybe I am misinterpreting this law incorrectly. But I'm absolutely hearing from my clients that the complaints that people are bringing forth and claiming a toxic workplace, a hostile work environment, they're experiencing trauma in the workplace. And when HR professionals are inquiring about what is causing that little t or big T trauma, HR professionals are really struggling with biting their tongues and being like, you gotta be kidding me. Yeah. I have to get work done. I'm so sorry your boss started the meeting late. Like, here's the EAP information. I don't know. Tell me what you're thinking. Like, how has victim mentality shown up in the workplace for you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like that. Because there's been such an evolution over the past just few years around what people are now talking about, and how, again, I'm kind of thinking, that definition that I gave a little earlier, I can totally see how that's a slippery slope, right? Like how I define it and how someone else defines it.
Totally
vastly different, especially those who really do get stuck in, victim mentality. So it's complicated, and it is a moving target.
Oh my God,
now. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't have, the best answer for like where this is all going, because I think this is really, it's just a really fascinating time. But I can say that my gut, my spidey senses has known for many, many, many years now that the way that the system has been set up has not been okay. It's not been okay, right? I have seen way too many times and way too many investigations, people getting railroaded based on policies and based on, the I'm drawing a blank, but just the way that the systems have been structured, that in terms of people who genuinely have been, hurt and belittled and bullied and all of that, I think that's just so real. And so trying to kind of navigate where all this is going now that people are finding their voice more, you're definitely going to see those people where like, wait, it was 5 minutes late. You're gonna see that more because now people are feeling empowered to be able to talk more. But I truly, like, again, going back to kind of my spidey senses, I think it's going in the right direction. Like, I think it's the right thing that we are now talking about it. It's just, it's going to kind of be a little bumpy.
Yeah.
You're gonna see the people who are taking advantage or maybe talking more than really they should be. But you're also going to find the people who have been terrified and shaking in the corner that are now finding a little flag to be able to say, hey, you know what, me too. And that's the people that I'm looking forward to seeing kind of this next evolution of where all this is going in the workplace. And
absolutely.
So in terms of like how I've seen it come up over the years, it's truly just been fascinating to see it evolve over these last several, years and be able to see that something, it's like that song, right? It's like something's happening here. What it is, because it is like something's happening here. And like call it victim mentality, whatever it is, it's like, yes, there's something that is requiring HR professionals to have to like show up. And and we'll get to this when we get into it, but y'all listening and watching, stay tuned because there are some true skills and true ways that you guys can learn to be able to navigate through this.
Absolutely.
And be able to show up for your people and figure out like being able to separate the victims from the victim mentality. Woo! I don't know about you, Kathy. It don't take me very long, right? It does not. Once you really have like the training and you understand kind of how to navigate through that, I can snuff it out pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really a matter of recognizing that it is going in the right direction. It's gonna be something that is yet to really kind of level out on, how fascinating this new day and age is. So
yeah, I mean,
that went all over the place, but I think we got there.
Well, I appreciate that because I've been very open, and I think this is important for HR practitioners to hear this. When Colorado passed the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, that allowed me to stand up for myself as an HR person and say, my pay's not right. Yeah. My boss is bringing in white males at more than double what I was brought in at as a female I started with 20 years of HR experience. And by the time I left, and by the time this gender and pay inequity that I experienced, it happened, I was 25 years into the HR profession. And I agree with you. The laws are absolutely trending in the right direction. Absolutely a correction. And I do feel like in some ways there's been an overcorrection, right?
Totally. Yeah, totally.
But without that law going into effect to say, you know what, we got to make sure, like, you have to publish your pay grades. You cannot ask people what they used to be paid, like all of these things. The intention is just so spot on. And you're right. It's going to continue to shift. It's going to continue to wobble. I think whole other topic, but multi-generational differences, fascinating. Although I did have a client who is in between Gen X and baby boomer who kept talking about how she was triggered by her boss in the work environment. And when, I started really listening to what she meant by triggered, she's like, well, he's not always calm when he speaks to me. And I get that. But When do we stop allowing people to be human in the workplace, to express their emotion, right? It's a double-edged sword. We're asking people to show up as their authentic selves, to be passionate about the work. And if they get really excited and maybe just a little, maybe they get louder, right? When does that become offensive and a violation versus when they're just humaning and they're passionate?
Yeah.
It is just crazy to me. It's crazy because I'm sure there are people just, our listeners are like, well, I would side this way and I would side this way. And this is what makes our profession so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that, because I think it's really, really tricky. And where is that, like, hump in terms of, like, it does go too far. But I think that the answer is in emotional intelligence. I think the answer is, like, really just learning, kind of being with it and really being willing to kind of have those difficult and challenging conversations so that it holds people accountable to it. So yeah, I could go down a whole rabbit hole.
I know. Sorry. I obviously could too.
Okay.
Let's get you to Kelly Clarkson. Let's go.
Let's go. Okay. Question 3. Reflecting on your own career, have there been moments where you felt you were slipping into victim mentality, and how did you recognize it?
I never slipped in it ever. I lived it. I got the gold medal for victim mentality. It took me until I was in my mid-40s to see it. Even the small examples of somebody coming to my office door, knocking, hey, do you have a second?
No.
And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I have so much to do. I have so much to do. I have so much to do.
Yeah.
And I would blame the person knocking at the door for how busy I was and getting me off track, right? Because I was overachiever, always trying to do too much, all of those types of things. So I didn't even understand what victim mentality was until I read David Emerald's book called The Power of TED. It is such a powerful book. We actually talked about the book in HR and Power Hour on Tuesday. And one of our members, shout out to this member, she knows who she is. She bought the book, she read it, and she's like, I cannot believe the role I have played as the rescuer. If you've read the book, you know what the rescuer is. As the rescuer, I have enabled victim mentality in the workplace for so long. And I watch my managers enable victim mentality, and it eats up so much of our time in HR.
Yeah.
It is wild. It's wild. And like I said, I see it so clearly because I was walking victim mentality. Like, I need to dress up as victim mentality for Halloween one year because I don't have to change my clothes or I just get to show up as me.
It's a big sign. Just wear the sign. I'm a victim. Oh my gosh.
What about you? Like, do you have any, like, clear moments where you felt like you were really slipping into it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm so lucky that I got to meet up with a gal here at this conference who was my intern about 6 years ago. So while she was in school in Southern Oregon University, she interned for me, and I was HR director for a hospitality company. And it's so funny because at that time, I was such a mess. Like, I just was always on fire, right? Like, I was always so busy and I was so overwhelmed. And, there was just always so many things going on, employee relations and everything else. And just terrible at, really managing my time and all of that. And I look back on it now. And when I was leading her as intern, we were last night having conversation about it, and I felt so apologetic. Like there was so much shame that came up for me because I truly did not feel like I was there for her very well. I felt like I was so scattered and so fragmented that I wasn't able to give the best of myself, right?
Yep.
And she was like, Jen, are you kidding? Like, she was like, you actually, like, even when it was micro moments, she's like, you inspired me so much. And, you know,
Yeah.
it's so funny because sometimes our perception
Oh
of
God, yeah.
how we might be is very different than what someone else sees.
Yes.
But what's funny during that time in terms of the victim mentality mindset is like, I spent so much of my time, especially when, you know, I was working, you know, huge long hours and when I wasn't working, I was drinking myself to practical death. But I just constantly, I remember just being miserable. I was always had something to complain about. I always thought everything was against me. So it's just funny now looking back on that 6 years later, where she can see me in one way where I, you know, had this mask basically where I was still trying to make it, trying to like, but the reality wasn't that at all. The reality was inside I was dying. Inside I was killing myself and I was self-sabotaging and I was just miserable in so many ways. And so I think the worst kind of victim mentality sometimes is not even the victim mentality that others see. It's the victim mentality that's going on right inside. And so that's, I think, the biggest lesson that I've learned, even just in these last few days, where, you know, I can see how much of a victim I was, but I hid it. I hid it from most people, had no clue. And yet, you know, inside it was a complete nightmare. So that's, you know,
I'm shaking my head because I just relate to all of this. And I think with any HR professional who suffers with imposter syndrome and suffers with a lot of self-doubt and negative thoughts and rumination, that tends to be victim mentality. And we don't understand that those terms can be synonymous.
Yeah.
And what I also don't know if people understand, it's the best news ever because you're responsible for your inner game and you get to change your inner game. Once you see that victim mentality, you cannot unsee it. And same, I mean, I definitely had my moments of shame. You know, if I see a former employee, former coworker, former boss on the street, my shame will come up, but I see that shame very quickly. And it's like, oh, that's just your shame. And same thing happens. I start talking to them and, you know, I'll be like, I'm so sorry. Like, I wasn't always the nicest person. I wasn't always approachable. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, absolutely. You weren't always 100% approachable and you're loved, right? Like loved working, same thing. So it's crazy how much of it is in here.
Yeah.
Best news ever. Got to work on this. Got to just, you know.
Ever. And you know, and then she and I had just this amazing conversation. So, you know, Lexi, I love you, Lexi, but we had the most amazing conversation because like, when it comes to where I've come, you know, in even just the 6 years since she's been around me and was my intern, she's like, what? Like, it's so obvious how different I am. And even I think I was a pretty decent leader before, but in talking with her and having a conversation around like how far I've come since getting involved with coaching and doing coaching, she's like, I could like follow you, you know, and it just, it says so much, I think, about the work that I've done and for anyone out there, it's never too late to be like, wow, you know what? Like I can see now what I was doing to myself. And again, like you and I are both saying, it's not about necessarily what you're projecting outwardly. It's about what's going on inside. And it's about what like spins, you know, are you continuously thinking, I'm not good enough. I shouldn't be here. This is right. You know, like, are those the thoughts that continue to repeat within your mind? That's a problem. And it's okay. You know, it's not like, there's something wrong with you. This is actually what makes you human. And so, she was just like, wow, like it was just like this wild conversation because, she was like, well, what is it? What are you do? What have you done?
Yes.
And I'm like, I just have worked on my brain, and that requires a lot of work, and it does not require an extra MBA or this or that. It just requires you having the intention to want to continue to find out what's really happening inside of you so that way you're not so hard on yourself. So anyway, I had just this beautiful moment where I got to do a little bit of impromptu coaching, and I had the best time.
I'm so happy for you. What a special moment. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's been fun. Okay, we got that question. Number 4. What are some ways that the victim mindset can hold people back, both personally and professionally? I think we've talked a few, but what else comes up for you?
I mean, I'm having a moment because I have watched a client really struggle with her victim mentality. And she's an HR professional and she doesn't see it. She hasn't quite woken up to her victim mentality quite yet. Pretty sure she's on the brain, but she's not there quite yet. And what's happened is in her personal life, it's her partner who is always the problem. And at work, there's a lack of trust amongst her and her teammates. And I think I see it so clearly because I know I was not always approachable in my career. Again, because I was just trying to do a million different things. And it's like, oh, I can't handle one more thing. Just always overloaded, always overwhelmed. And I have watched how employees in this organization that she serves, they won't go to HR. They won't go to her because she's not approachable. And it creates a really interesting dynamic when you're very, very high up in HR and even your boss is afraid to hold you accountable, right? It's just very, very interesting. So I think it holds people back in that regard in terms of really being able to serve as HR professionals, to be at our very best. And honestly, it holds us back from happiness. It holds us back from joy. It holds us back from all of the emotions that we seek as human beings. And you just don't see it until you see it, and then you can't unsee it. Once you start to recognize that victim mentality, just those thoughts of, just the blame and shame of other people. Once you start seeing it and understanding that that is victim mentality and you don't have to keep choosing those thoughts, nothing will stop you. It's the opposite of being held back. Because people with victim mentality, they're holding themselves back. Nobody else is doing it. It's the thoughts that they're choosing that are holding them back. Again, former gold medalist. Right here. Jen, what about you? What do you think how do you think it holds people back?
Oh my gosh. So
I don't know if I even answered that in the right way, but there you go.
I think you did. We all, I think, have it. We all have the tendency to have, our egos kind of take over where, we really are struggling to kind of see beyond, limitations that we think we have or whatever. And so coming to the conference that I came to this week, the timing couldn't have been worse, right? Like we're in the process of implementing the system. We're in the middle of open enrollment. Like it was bad timing. And so here I am in my head thinking, shame spiral as I'm, flying out here, and I'm like, oh, I'm at the airport trying to get something done for open enrollment and all stressed. And so I ended up having a conversation with my boss after I got here. And what I love about my boss is like, he's so aware when it comes to, really being able to get the best out of something or somebody, like people or whatever. And he had, basically said to me, he's like, Jen, you know what? Like, you need to like just really be able to immerse yourself in this experience. Let work go. You do not have to do anything, like just shut it all down and just focus on being there and enjoying, So it was like getting that permission is like, you and I have been in HR many, many years, 24 years I've been in HR, and I've never had a boss say, it's okay. You can let go, you can enjoy yourself. And so here I then come to this conference and I meet woman after woman, and man, I've met so many people for several days, and I ran a 5K. So the first day of the conference, I ran this 5K, and I've just been immersing myself in the experience of being somewhere where every other time I've ever been to conferences, here's the two things that happen, right?
Oh, yeah.
I just try to force myself as much as I possibly can in like a round peg into a square hole so I can learn every single possible thing I can learn. And then during the night times, I'm getting as high as I possibly can, either drugs, alcohol, or, like I had just these tendencies to like overdo it and not take care of myself, and then to blame myself to the point where I'm just like not really getting the most out of the experience. And this time I can truly and very confidently say that I've been able to like really enjoy the experience. So this is the first conference I've ever been to that they have AA meetings in the morning. So from like 6 to 7 in the morning, every morning since this conference started, I went to an AA meeting, and there's only a few of us there for a conference of like 4,000 people. And there was, yesterday there was 5 of us at the table, and today there was 3 of us at the table. And it was the best part of my day, yesterday and today. That's what's that?
That connection.
Well, it's the connection, and it's really about like recognizing how much I have to offer just by being here and by, wanting to engage and be a part of, the experience. And so I think that, when it comes to kind of my brain and how I've tended to like really feed into, oh, poor me. And, this is so hard. And, I should be doing this and the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and all of that, versus like shutting all that off and just slowly taking one step at a time and just really enjoying the moment. And so I think that's, now I'm trying to remember my question, but I think that's where, like, in looking at Jen, 2 years, 1 year, 5 years ago, that's where I would have been held back from an opportunity to just truly be able to give, myself and the experience the best of me. And I think that's just so much of what we do so often in life. We have like these expectations around where we think we need to be giving as hard as we possibly can. And yet, that our cup is not run us over, right? So we're like pouring from these almost empty cups, and we're not really like checking in with ourselves around what we really need and how we can really, give and show up as our best. And so, this conference has really like been
amazing,
kind of an amazing wake up call for me around like how I would have been in the past, and then how I am now. And then was it yesterday? No, 2 days ago, I hit, 90 days sobriety. And so I'm like, I continue to kind of make these milestones and recognize that would have never been me. I would have never been able to do that a year ago.
Totally.
And And so in recognizing, part of like being, this victim mentality is really about just not a fear of letting go of what we don't have control over, and what we, kind of fear of what. No, I'm rambling, but
No, you're not.
I feel like I've come so far, and I'm just so grateful. And this podcast and you and all of this has been on my mind so much for the last few days, just because it's been the greatest gift of my life. And then now being able to share it in, an experience like this is like, okay, that's what it means to like come from a place of victim mentality to now be able to recognize how empowered I've been all along.
1000%. And I'm going to let you ask the next couple of questions, because I could seriously talk about this for 4 days. I could just keep going. I guess the one thing I want to add, you started off by answering that question with, I now have a boss who really supports me in this immersive experience at the conference.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to love this. My last boss was always telling me, slow down. I need you to slow down. You're trying to do too much. He saw it. He saw the push, the perfectionist, the high achiever.
Yeah.
And my victim mentality here was my thought. Oh, he doesn't understand HR. He doesn't understand. I'm the first ever HR person in this organization. He doesn't understand what it takes to be a good HR person, how much I have on my plate. If any of our listeners can relate to that, it's victim mentality.
Yeah.
Right. So even though I had a boss saying, slow down, you're going to burn out, I was like, oh, he doesn't get it. That's victim mentality.
Yeah.
If you have, for any of our listeners, if you have a thought that sounds like they don't understand, that is just notice it.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll never not be able to notice it moving forward. I'm just going to throw out a bunch of double negatives for the rest of the podcast to keep everyone on their toes.
Well, I love it, because that goes so perfectly into the fifth question. So what role does self-awareness play in breaking free from a victim mindset, and how can HR leaders foster it in themselves?
Listen to this podcast. And if anything we have said resonates, I mean, it's the one thing about emotional intelligence. How can you have self-awareness if you have a blind spot? Obviously, stating the obvious there. Maybe even, I guess, to answer the question, self-awareness is everything. It's the very first step. It's absolutely essential. And if you suspect, if you've been listening to this podcast and thinking, oh my gosh, I am just like Jen and Kath. First of all, there is nothing wrong with you. Jen's absolutely right. You are just humaning. But here's the thing. I have actually had a client use, well, I'm just humaning. Thank you for allowing me to human. Because I say that a lot when I'm coaching my clients. You don't want to use humaning against yourself, because you're really just going to continue to swirl in that victim mentality. When you notice, when you have the self-awareness of, oh, I'm just being a human right now, that is the first step. There are more steps to get out of victim mentality, but you've got to have the first step for sure. Jen, what do you think self-awareness, how do you think that plays? What role does it play? Let's see if I can get my words out. I'm just going to keep stuttering and stuttering.
You're absolutely completely right. It's number one. It's the first step. And yet it's where most people end up stalling out, because that self-awareness can get really scary. It's uncomfortable. It's not an enjoyable experience to become aware of where you've been holding yourself back, where you've been the one causing you the suffering that you're so trying to get away from. Like that, I think, in the coaching world, that's one of the things where when we can get to that point where someone really starts to recognize that they, through the process of self-awareness, that they are really the ones who are causing kind of so much of the suffering, That's the part. It's like, they may or may not come back after that because that's a humbling and really kind of scary place to go. And yet, both Kathy, you and I will absolutely agree. It's also the most beautiful place. It's like for anyone who's ever been an addict or a heavy drinker, right? That's our rock bottom. That is the rock bottom.
Yeah.
You get to that place where you recognize it hurts like hell. It does not feel good. You're like, oh my God, right?
I cannot
the shame
do
and
this
just the terror.
anymore.
And yet, when you allow yourself to just sit with it and be with it and just, kind of work through the body sensations and all the things that a coach and any kind of practitioner can help with.
Yeah.
And you work through that rock bottom place. That's where the magic can start coming in, right? That's where we start to learn about a little bit of self-compassion and just some grace with ourselves. And, you start just opening up this whole new world of like, yeah, that is it, right? Like that's the truth of how I've been holding myself back and everything else. But yet now here is this beautiful, it's almost like, the Wizard of Oz, right? It starts to become Technicolor. You're like, well, wait, now which path do I want to take? I get to choose. I get to decide where this is going to go now. And and that can be overwhelming too. So it really, I think when it comes to self-awareness, it is the beginning. And yet, without some kind of support, whether that's mentorship or just a good buddy or coach or therapist, that can be a really jarring place to be. But when you can really stick with it and hold yourself through that, that's where you have the opportunity to really start to create. And that's an exciting place to start going into. So, yeah. Long answer, but I feel so passionately about that, about, just recognizing, hey, you know what, self-awareness, you go girl, you go boy, because you're starting to make your way towards where the dreams can start to come true. So, I just think that, in terms of what you and I do and this program and this podcast, that's where, we really, I love spending that time in that place of like, you are okay. Everything is just fine. Stay that course. And let's talk about now where, let's talk about the Play-Doh that now is in front of you.
Yes. Oh, I've never heard that analogy.
Yeah.
Play-Doh. Let's play.
Play-Doh.
Play-Doh. Not Plato, the philosopher. Although it could be Play-Doh with Play-Doh. I don't know. It could be.
Molding and growing and moving. So, okay, well, let's slide on into our last question. So question number 6, how can HR professionals help colleagues or employees move past a victim mindset and into a more empowered mindset without diminishing our experiences? So that goes back to that question earlier, right? Everyone's experience is valid, like wanting to truly like appreciate and recognize the individual, but how do we help them get past what we, these habitual places that people get into around victim mentality?
I want to use a couple of really specific examples to first identify like a technique that I like to use, but then I want to break the technique down in as succinctly as I possibly can, which Jen and many of our listeners know is a little bit of a challenge for me. So let's say an employee comes in, right, with a little bit of victim mentality that sounds something like, I just sat in a meeting and nobody listened to my ideas. And I'm really frustrated. Nobody's listening to my ideas. So what I tend to do in those types of situations, because that's a little bit of victim mentality, nobody's listening to me. Little bit of victim mentality there. So what I like to do is to repeat verbatim part of the words that they use. Okay, so what I'm hearing is, if they say, and I'm feeling frustrated or I'm feeling upset, whatever. Okay, so you're frustrated because nobody's listening to your ideas. Why is it important for people to listen to your ideas? right?
Mm.
And then, they start to well, it's important because I have some great ideas, and they start to okay, great. So what needs to change so that you can articulate your ideas? What needs to change in that situation that's within your control? How can you show up a little bit differently so that your ideas are heard? So I like to use the person's exact language to help shift their mindset out of that disempowered thinking and into empowered thinking. Another example might be like, I'm always the one who's picking up the slack for my team. I'm always the one who's staying late. I'm always the one who's coming in early. Okay, so it sounds like you feel like you're always the one who's picking up the slack. Do you want other people to pick up the slack? Do you want to just stop picking up the slack? Like, what do you actually want to be experiencing? So you start to help the employee come up with their own solution. I mean, it's just basic coaching techniques. I say basic, but this is because of what I do all day long. So it's okay. Helping the employee identify what they do want to be experiencing. So again, if they start with, I'm just always picking up the slack. Okay. Do you want others to pick up the slack 100% of the time? Do you want, or do you like picking up the slack? Is that rewarding for you sometime? Like what would success look like for you when it comes to who's picking up the slack and when? Like, what would that actually look like? And just shift their brain and start trying to understand what they think the optimal outcome might be. And then brainstorming with them in terms of what they can try to experiment with. Kind of like what you said with Play-Doh. Mm-hmm. I think of it as Play-Doh. I think maybe I'm a total weirdo, but I think it's actually fun. I think it's fun to experiment with new ideas, right? Mm-hmm. But the trick is, you don't want to bombard the employee with the ideas because you're taking away their sense of autonomy. It needs to be some sort of a brainstorming, especially if they are stuck. If you don't have a full-blown coaching repertoire where you know how to solicit ideas out of those employees, then I think brainstorming is a good first step, to be totally honest. Oh my gosh, why am I talking so much? Tell me what you think, Jen. What do you think?
You are not talking so much. It's so funny. We both do that. It's so interesting how our brains are constantly like, it goes into this space of like, I've gone too far. And yet, in the reality.
Female socialization right there. I mean, we're just like walking examples of it. Totally. Still works in progress. Even though we've done a ton of work, we are still works in progress and we're not ashamed of it.
Absolutely. Well, I'll piggyback all over what you shared, because in terms of, the coaching skills you and I have learned as we've worked with people, and just over the years, the skills that I've recognized when it comes to helping people who truly, and for me, here's the biggest thing that it comes down to, because I've worked, with so many different leaders over the years in HR spaces and also consulting and coaching. And so often you'll have, different leaders that'll come to you and say, hey, I need you to work with this supervisor or this manager, and I need you to help get them out of, whatever, challenge that they're having, because, they're constantly, struggling or whatever. And ultimately, you don't really have the full buy-in of that individual leader, right? Like, and so often in working with different leaders, that for me has come down to such a huge deal breaker when it comes to me wanting to work with them. It's like, if you're not fully engaged in that change process, right? If you're not fully engaged in being truly open in a self-awareness way, in recognizing what you own, and then also what's missing, then, it's not that I have no use for you and I just feel like, get the F out of here, whatever. But it's really, I think that for me is the biggest thing of all. It's like, you have to want it. You have to truly desire and recognize that you're in a place that is that gets stuck. And again, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it and all of that. But yet, if you find that, that's just not where you're at, then cool. It's not the time for you.
Yeah.
Because, I think that that's such a major mind shift thing where, if you're not going to be, really ready to own and take self accountability, don't bother. So anyway, now we're past that, if we now have like the ownership and the recognition, hey, I am in this, then I loved what you said about that co-collaborative, that co-creation, right? And that for me is what I love most about coaching. This is not me regurgitating and just, putting things onto you. This is a co-collaborative, co-created process. And that's what I love the most about these types of, situations where somebody recognizes that they get stuck, that they're having kind of these repetitive challenges that they, really want to be able to push past that victim mindset. And then having somebody, like you said, repeating and, really helping them see what they're not really seeing. And that's the beautiful process of it, where somebody can then see it and hear it, have compassion about it, right? Move past that self-judgment. And then with that co-collaborative process, say, okay, now what? What are we going to do? How do we get proactive? And then holding that person accountable through the process of making those changes, because they don't change overnight. It takes time. It takes practice. It takes the willingness to mess it up. I almost said the F word. It takes the willingness to not get it right all the time. So I think, for me, really, it just comes down to true ownership, true ownership from beginning, middle, and end. And then all along the way, I will be your biggest cheerleader. I would be your biggest ambassador, and that's what I love about, what you and I have the opportunity to do, is we are going to want to be able to help people through, this process, but you gotta want it. You gotta want it. And so
there has to be a willingness. There has to be a willingness.
And and it's simple, and it's not that simple, but yet you've got a lot of support, just like me this morning with that, just a few people at a recovery meeting. Like, you gotta want it. You gotta be willing to show up, and you gotta be willing to say, hey, I can't do this alone. And that's gosh, what a beautiful step, to take for any human. So, okay. Any last thoughts that you have before we wrap up today?
I think on the other side, like the polar opposite of victim mentality is freedom. I have just experienced so much freedom in, even the victim mentality of, I don't have a lot of time with my parents left. That is victim mentality. And the opposite of that is, I have the time now, and I'm going to relish in it, and I'm going to spend as much time with them as I possibly can, and every single moment is going to count.
Yeah.
That to me was one of the biggest game changers my first coach ever taught me. It was my relationship with my parents and just my victim mentality that I had. So my point is, it applies in the workplace. It applies in our personal lives, and on just past that uncomfortableness, sitting with the emotions, past that shame of, oh my God, I've never known that I'm a victim mentality, is absolute freedom, calm, peace, happiness, all the things that we pursue as human beings. And it's right there. You are so close. Keep going. Keep going.
I love that. Well, before we wrap up, I'd love to hear, you said a little bit earlier something about HR and Power Hour, that you talked about victim mentality this week.
I've got to get my elevator pitch together, Jen.
Well, I'd love to hear what's coming up in the coming weeks.
Oh my gosh, I have no idea. Let me go to my website and look. It's so funny because every Tuesday I teach. I'm literally pulling up my website right now. Every Tuesday I teach. Every Thursday I coach. And at the end of today's coaching session for the HR Empower Hour members, I was like, I have no idea what's coming up for next week. Next week is workplace conflict. Is it helpful or harmful?
Ooh, I can't wait for you to talk about that too.
We are going to talk about that too. So that's another chunky topic. I think a lot of HR professionals want to like shy away from workplace conflict. I've seen professionals for the last 28 years sweeping things under the rug, and doesn't work. Kind of like in our relationships, doesn't work.
Yeah.
So there's a way for it to be helpful. Conflict can be helpful. So that's next week. And we're going to talk about it doing the podcast.
I love it. I love it. Well, very cool. Well, everybody, we are wrapping up this episode 38, and we're so grateful for you. We're grateful for everyone who watches and for listening, and hopes that, if you haven't downloaded or, shared or liked or given us any kind of love, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to continue to get us out there. So share us on your socials and tag us, and we would just love to continue to grow this community. So Katherine, thank you so much for another incredible podcast. I am going to get my shoes on and go see Kelly Clarkson.
Please have the best time for me.
I will.
I mean, for you, but maybe one song for me, maybe like one lyric.
I will
have a great time, Jen.
Do that.
So
and everybody, thank you so much for joining. And don't forget, every day is a new day to thrive and shine in HR. Bye, everybody.
Bye.